Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name's Clint Button, and I'm a granite sculptor. Welcome to video number 27 of the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. I want to do a video on sharpening tools. I'm not going to get into the mechanics of how you actually hold your tool against the grindstone or the sharpening stone and what jig you use. And it has to be a 10-degree bevel for this stone and a 30-degree bevel for that stone. And there's a lot of that information out there. What I want to tell you isn't out there because people overcomplicate it. I don't use jigs. I don't use bevel gauges. I don't do all that stuff. And I've done this for, decades. So I'm probably doing something okay. I want to talk about how the angles actually work with what you're doing, and you're going to have to make decisions and apply them as you need to. Now, I will start off by saying if you're using a powered grinder, this work will kill you if you're not careful. You can be one of my masters. After I opened my studio, was dressing a chisel, the butt of a chisel, and he got too low on the wheel, and that wheel snatched that chisel, and he lost the end of his finger. Said he felt pretty stupid, but it's one of those things. You've got to be careful. And even if you've done this for, I could go over to the next time I put a tool on the grinder, I could have the same kind of accident happen, and it'd be pretty bad. So you've got to be careful. You got to wear your eye protection. You got to deal with the dust. You got to watch that you don't literally lose body parts or have something stuck in you that you'll bleed out, and it could really be bad. So if you don't know how to do this and you're afraid to do it, don't do it. Get somebody else to do it. But if you're going to do it, let's talk about the angles and stuff like that so you can understand what you're doing. Before I start, I wanted to show real quick, I keep talking about being cheap, getting the most for your money, all this. I made all of these sample blanks, went over the bandsaw and cut them out. I got all of these wedges now, throwing my box full of wedges to use in my studio to wedge up work. Nothing gets thrown away, use all of it. Okay, and I'm going to keep a couple here just for examples because I got something to show you. Let's set these out of the way. Okay, when you buy a new tool, the steepness or the bluntness of your tool has a lot to do with what you're cutting and the angle that you apply that tool to the job. You can't put an axe, you can sharpen an axe sharp enough to shave with, but you can't put a razor blade on an axe handle and chop wood. It just doesn't work. Because the razor blade will be so thin that it will break. You can do it for certain things, but as a general rule, you want a more blunt edge because it's a more abusive job that you're doing, hitting it like that. For a wood carving tool, you can have a very steep, a very, very low angle so that it cuts and parts well. So I'm going to show this tool. This is typically how a lot of tools will come to you sharpened. And they will have a long bevel, one long bevel, or they may have two bevels where they've got a long bevel and then a different bevel where this would be suitable for heavy work, this would be suitable for sharp work, okay? So you understand, I don't know what these angles are, I don't really care. I just do what I need to do for the work, and the way I gauge what I need to do and how sharp or blunt I need to have my tool is I sharpen it and then I put it on the stone. And you know what happens if it's too sharp? It snaps. It breaks right off. Okay? That's a problem. Because now I've got to dress this tool back to deal with it. So because that breaks, and your carbide will break like that, your tool steel will not break as easily like that, but you can still fracture it. And one of the problems that people have is they'll take a round chisel or a square chisel and they'll break it, and then they have to push it back a lot in order to make it square again. So usually what I do is if I break a chisel, I'll try to keep it If I break a lot, I usually don't break them now because I've done this long enough, but I'll keep it and I'll make it a round chisel. That's the round chisel I use. Then I'll grab another straight one and just make it straight, try not to blow a corner off. But instead of wasting all this carbide, I'll just dress off this other corner and round it on the grinder real quick, and I'll have a round chisel. Save some money, okay? So when your tool either chips or simply gets dull because you've used it enough, whatever, if it's a single or double bevel, you know, if it's something like this, whatever, it'll end up getting blunt. With granite, this happens fairly fast. Now, and these are large, obviously, so we don't have to try to do microscopic, you know, magnification stuff. But when you have your tool like this, you need to sharpen it. Now, there's different ways to do that, whether you're on a manual stone where you would sharpen it like this, or if you're on a grinder where you would hold it up above, well above the center of the wheel and sharpen it. The problem arises for most people who aren't familiar with sharpening and familiar with angles is that they don't sharpen the whole blade. They don't take this entire bevel down to make it look like this again. They make it look like this. And the problem with that, when you end up with this tool that is better suited for hard work or dull work, I don't know what else to call it, is that when you put this tool on the stone to cut, and if you go down at a shallow angle, if you do that with this stone, with this tool, it can actually ramp out to where you're rubbing on one bevel, and the cutting edge doesn't actually hit the stone. And so you end up just doing a lot of abrasion with this bottom corner. And you end up with a tool that looks more like this, and it isn't really sharp. So a way to address that, you'll have to keep your tools dressed back, because even if you sharpen your tools correctly and go all the way back, you will eventually have a side that you need to clean off, and so you need to go back to making it deeper. A better solution when you're cutting, depending on what work you're doing, is to sharpen your tool with a new bevel that's not as steep. And so this is a compromise between this and this. And this is actually how I end up sharpening a lot of my tools when I'm working. I'll keep it sharp here because it makes it a little more durable. I can make this edge fairly thin, and then I can push this shoulder back as I need to. And this is how I end up doing most of my tools. If I'm doing something that's really a real hard stone, a real brittle stone, like an India jet black, I mean, carving Chinese black with carbide just is a waste of time because it'll just destroy all your carbide. But with something that's really hard, like an India jet black, I'll dress the edge round a little bit. I'll do this same type of cut, and I'll actually take a stone and I'll round this end off a little bit. So it isn't sharp, but it's sharp enough that it will cut the stone. So for anything except very, very fine work, and this works really, really well. Now, when you're grinding your tools, one of the things that a lot of people have trouble with is they don't have a grinder that's large enough. And I just grabbed these wheels. This is an exhausted wheel that was an 8-inch wheel. It's now around 5 inches. But a lot of people only have a 6-inch grinder. This is an 8-inch grinder. The problems arise when they try to use this wheel, a small wheel, to sharpen and produce an edge like this. They'll actually end up producing an edge more like this, and then you get into those same ramp out issues where the tool won't engage in the work because it's not cut right, and when it does engage, this edge is so thin it breaks. So having a larger grinder is better, or you have to be much more conscientious so you don't pattern the tool to the wheel. You may have to go at a diagonal. It's not advised to work on the side face of a wheel because they're not rated for that. For minor touch-up, I don't think it's a problem. I haven't ever had a wheel blow up, but they will. So you've been warned. But this is a problem. When you're sharpening your tools, you can look at them, and this is obvious, this is exaggerated, but this is another way of looking at it. As you look at your tool, see if we can hold that up, you can see that square face on the end of that tool, okay? As long as you can see that, it's not sharp. There is no square face on the end of this tool. This is sharp. So you just have to dress it, sharpen it until there's no visible line. You may have to put a lamp on your grinder so you can look at it and see, or by your sharpening stone. You know, if you're carving granite and you're going to sharpen on a hand grind stone, that's really hard because you're never going to have any time carving. You're going to spend all your time sharpening tools. So get a good grinder. But when that line disappears, that tool is sharp. Okay. Now for my grinder, I keep an 80 grit green wheel for carbide. That's what I use. But this is the kind of information on the bevel. I don't necessarily know what a specific granite will require. If a stone, normally I've got a pretty good idea. If I cut something different, I've got to try, and I will put a sharp bevel on a tool, usually like this, because after I first sharpen it, I usually end up going down like this just to conserve some material, and then I'll take the shoulder off all at once later. But I'll do this, and if I need it to be sharper, I'll make it sharp until it starts to break, and then I realize I can't use it that sharp, and so I'll make it a little bit more steep and just keep carving, and it works just fine. On a previous video, I talked about a 9-point, and bushing tools are 9 points. This would be analogous, and this holds just so I can hang them up on the wall for afterwards. It's got nothing to do with sharpening. For a 9-point, you've got 3 rows of points in 3 directions and 3 rows of points in the other direction. So there's on a cross there's 9, or you could have a 16-point, or you could have a 4-point. You're going to have equal teeth, okay? And as you use this, these tops round off, and they'll look like that. Now this won't cut the stone out or break the stone out as easily. It'll start pulverizing the stone into little bitty pieces, and it gets really slow, and you end up stunning the stone, which isn't ideal. So to sharpen this tool, I did a little graphic on one of the other videos, but I thought I'd add this to this one as well. When you sharpen these, this is how you do it. You have to have a narrow wheel. You can do it with a round file and a triangular file. If you're doing it by hand, like if you're doing tool steel, you've got marble tools or whatever, and if you use a round file, your triangle file will last a lot longer because you won't exhaust this sharp edge, and I'll tell you why here in just a second. So when you go from this tool, your grindstone will be worn out from the last time you sharpened it, and so you've got a skinny wheel, and it's going to have a dull edge, okay? And you're going to have to dress that with like a old diamond saw blade or whatever to make it sharp. But before you do that, don't waste this. You have to pay money for this. Make this count. So you take this wheel, that wheel that's dull, and you go down in between each tooth in 2 rows, this way, and then you turn your tool and do the other 2 ways. And you'll end up producing what looks like this. These edges won't necessarily be sharp, and you probably will have a little bit. You just want to go enough until you run out of line. There's no line there. You want to make this sharp both ways. And so you do this so that your wheel fits, and you use this material before you waste it off to make the tool sharp. And then you dress your wheel with a diamond blade or whatever to make it sharp. And then you turn your tool, you put your tool on this wheel, and you sink it. And it will take it'll make your deep furrows with that sharp edge, and you do it both directions. And then I usually will turn the tool on all four sides, because you'll get the edges a little bit better, so that you've got an even channel all the way across, so you don't have it strong in one place and weak in another, which ends up making it weak. Now, I hope you can see the lines on here. This is your original edge, and you're going to be deeper than that edge at the bottom of these furrows. Don't worry about that. Then, after you've done this, then you go, my grinder's got a skinny wheel on one side and a 1-inch regular wheel on the other side. After I do this on my narrow wheel, I go over to my regular grinder, and I grind all four sides, and I put this, grind this off to make it look like this. And that will even up all my points. This should be the same depth as your valley, so that everything is even, and you've got a nice sharp 9-point again, and you've done it with a minimal amount of dressing on your skinny wheel. And that's got to be a green wheel as well. It's a camel wheel that I order online or buy at the stores down to Alberton. The granite suppliers keep them in stock because we use a lot of them. Now, if you're doing this with tools for limestone or marble, you can saw it in with a hacksaw. You can cut it in with a file, but do the same thing. Use a round file to establish your new tops, and then use your triangular file just to sink the depth. And you'll end up you won't stress the tool as quickly. You can, and the round file will give you a better ability to place these, because sometimes when you go in with a sharp, if it tracks to one side or the other because one side's dull and one side sharp, you end up wandering way off. And so sharpening by hand, you end up with problems like that. So start with a round file and then finish it up with a triangular file if you're doing these by hand and you're doing it in tool steel. So, but your position on your wheels generally is going to be up here, so that you've got good contact, because once you start getting down near the center is when it'll grab and it'll flip and you're off to the hospital. So, but that's, in a nutshell, that's what I would advise people to do. Don't worry about you can worry about all the angles you want. I never do. This covers the way I see angles and the way I make things sharp. Doesn't matter if it's a chef's knife in the kitchen, or if it's a pocket knife that you carve wood with, or a gouge or a chisel that you carve wood with, or stoneworking tools. Sharp, sharp, dressed off, and a hard work tool like a chisel you might swing and use a 4-pound hammer or something like that with, or maybe a hand point. This is the kind of point, sharp edge you'd want on it. But these are the dangers, is having this kind of transfer from a small grind wheel that causes these shoulders that makes trouble for you. The same thing with sharpening your tool too little and leaving shoulders on it and then trying to do sharp work, because sharp work is usually done with a tool that's very flat to the stone compared to vertical to the stone. This will interfere with that because it will pivot up on that fulcrum and it won't make any contact. You won't do any good. So look at your line, dress it off if you need to when you're working, and then here's stuff on doing 9 points. So I hope this makes sense. I hope it helps. You've got to be able to sharpen tools to carve stone if you're going to carve stone with chisels. There's simply no other way to do it. And this is what I can tell you to do. Sharpen it until it starts to chip, and then back off a little bit, and you can probably make the best progress for the work you're doing. So, my name's Clint Button here at Carolina Sculpture Studio with the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship, talking about sharpening information, so you can sharpen your tools better and do better work. Thanks for coming in.